What's up, buddies? So this is my last video recapping the Resident Evil games, and this time it's 7 and 8, the last two games released aside from remakes. Now I know, I didn't play Resident Evil Survivor, so I really didn't recap all the Resident Evil games, but how about you play Resident Evil Survivor and tell me if you want a video on it? Anyway, these two games are very good, definitely the two scariest games in the series. Now other games had their tense moments, but nothing like these two. If I really had to nitpick and find something for each game to say I don't like, it would be that 7 has a big lack of enemy variety and 8 overuses the giant monster fight a lot. But that's about it. So before we get into the actual video, if you haven't seen my videos or played the games, let me tell you what you need to know for these two. So a bunch of eugenics fans founded a company called Umbrella. The two most important founders of this video are Oswald Spencer, a British billionaire, and James Marcus, a genius virology researcher. Umbrella Company develops biological weapons, or BOWs, to sell to militaries around the world. The company had their ups and downs, one of which happened when they offed Marcus because he was losing his mind. But eventually they caused a couple zombie outbreaks with their BOWs and forced the government to nuke a city. So the government shuttered the company. After the nuking of Raccoon City, no legitimate military force would even think about purchasing BOWs anymore, and they were pretty much banned worldwide. That didn't stop people from making them, however, and many black market suppliers popped up to sell their products to gangs and terrorists around the world. This resulted first in the founding of the United States Federal Bioterrorism Commission, or FBC. However, they were exposed and replaced by the United Nations-backed Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance, or BSAA. The BSAA was founded by some of the best BOW fighters in the world, like Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine, but despite that, they suck ass. They are horrible at their job, and let me explain why. The BSAA seems to have no kind of intelligence apparatus, meaning they never actually prevent bioterrorism attacks, only respond to them. And by the time they do respond, the situation is usually so out of hand, the BSAA can barely deal with it. Go watch my videos on RE5 or 6 for two great examples of how the BSAA almost let the world be destroyed twice. But that is pretty much all you need to know for now, so let's get straight into Resident Evil 7. RE7 begins with a video. This woman named Mia begs her husband Ethan to not come looking for her. He received this video 3 years ago and she's been missing since then. But recently Ethan discovered a mysterious letter from her pointing him to the Baker Estate in Dolby, Louisiana. That's not a real place, but it's supposed to be in the Louisiana Bayou, which is basically a large stretch of wetlands and swamps. It's a very pretty place, however that's probably the last place I'd want to go looking for somebody. Our protagonist is Ethan Winters, a systems engineer, a job type which does not require you to have experience fighting BOWs. I'm sure it'll be fine though. Ethan pulls up to this super rundown house out in the woods. It seems to be abandoned, so he decides to let himself in. You can almost catch a glimpse of somebody walking around the property, maybe Ethan's missing wife? There's some Blair Witch-ass decorations hanging outside, but he eventually gets into this extremely run-down house. Everything at the house is rotten, moldy, and covered in cockroaches. However, Ethan finds a VHS tape lying on a table. The tape is not that old, it's from 2017, which is the same year the game takes place, so I don't know why they're using VHS tapes. But anyway, it's a recording from a YouTube ghost hunting show hosted by a failed weatherman and some guy named Andre. It's the cameraman Clancy's first day on the job. Weatherboy is a dick the entire time, but the three decide to scope out the house before they start filming the actual show. Andre tells us a little about the house's history.
So, Hillbilly Joe and his family go missing.
Not hillbillies, the Bakers. Jack and Marguerite Baker. And they were quiet, not backward. A lot of bad rumors about their son, Lucas. Bad seed, apparently.
A little farther in, though, Andre goes missing. Clancy finds him in the basement, but he's not looking so good. Ethan is undeterred by what he just witnessed, and he finds a pull chain to open the way to that basement. The basement is flooded, and if people on TikTok are to be believed, Ethan would instantly die from sepsis from stepping in the still water.
Still water is one of the most dangerous things you can come across.
I mean, maybe that's what happened to Andre as his body's floating around down here too. At the end of the basement, Ethan finds his wife locked in a musty cell. She's pissed that Ethan is here as she explicitly told him to stay away. But then what was up with that letter? She has no memory of what she was doing here or how long it's been, but she does know that they need to run before Daddy catches them. Alright, buddy, but she ends up collapsing on a couch while Ethan tries to find another way out of the basement. The second he leaves her side, though, something breaks through the wall and snatches her. Ethan goes upstairs to investigate, but there's still no one here. He goes back downstairs to see if she might still be down there, and it turns out... Mia loses her mind and starts stabbing the shit out of Ethan, only solving her domestic abuse when she bangs her own head against the wall. Ethan's hand is fucked up, but there's this nice green liquid made of the mystical green herb from the other games that makes it feel better. Once he heals, though, Mia rises again to continue abusing her husband, and Ethan has no choice but to kill his wife, the same one he came all this way to save. A phone rings across the house. Some country girl named Zoe tells Ethan he can find a way out in the attic of the house.
My name's Zoe.
Ethan finds a fuse that he can use to open the attic entrance, but Mia is still not dead and she's entirely healed from the axe wound. First, she sticks Ethan to the wall with a screwdriver, and just as he gets it out, she cuts off his entire fucking hand, leaving Ethan with a bleeding stump. He has no choice but to try to escape through the attic, however Mia emerges once again with a chainsaw to take his other hand. In the attic, Ethan finds a gun, so he has to kill his wife for the second time. Whatever is possessing her also allows her to take multiple blows to the head, but eventually Ethan downs Mia again. She broke the way out that Zoe is mentioning though, and as Ethan heads back downstairs we finally meet who Mia was talking about.
Welcome to the family, son.
That man is Jack Baker, and he drags Ethan and Mia's lifeless bodies towards the main portion of his estate. Ethan goes in and out of consciousness, only waking up long enough to hear Zoe stapling his hand back on. He apparently did a good job though, as his hand is as good as new. It's currently tied down though, as Ethan finds himself forcibly eating dinner with the rest of the Baker family. There's Jack and his wife Marguerite, their son Lucas, and somebody's grandma who looks like she's about 90% of the way dead. So Ethan has been kidnapped by a family of hillbillies, but at least Marguerite cooked for him. A nice helping of rotting human organs. Lucas is being an asshole the entire dinner, but Jack finally puts him in his place by sawing off one of his arms. Lucas is unfazed though. He tries to force feed Ethan, but he can't stomach it.
Oh shit, he's not eating it, Jack! He's not eating it!
Get the hell up, Marguerite!
I made that for him!
Get the hell out of here!
You're a son of a bitch! Oh, I can't believe it!
Jack seems to think that the problem is that Ethan's mouth isn't big enough. But a phone call finally draws the family away from torturing Ethan, leaving only him and Granny at the table. Ethan manages to break out of his chair. I mean, it's not like she's gonna stop him, but there's no way out as all doors are locked and all windows are boarded. Jack finishes his call with the cops and comes back to find Ethan out of his chair. A very interesting event can happen here. Jack can corner Ethan and chop one of his legs off. All Ethan has to do to reattach it though is pour on a little of that green herb juice and it's as good as new. Now those green herbs are pretty good in the other games, but what they don't do is reattach limbs. Interesting. Anyway, Ethan escapes into a crawl space under the house, which gets him into the laundry room. So far, the Baker estate seems to be a humble abode, but let me tell you man, these hillbillies have a fucking compound here. Now I'll say this, it's a lot easier to own a lot of land when you live in the middle of nowhere, and your family has owned that land for 100 years, but it gets a little excessive with the Bakers. Zoe calls him in the laundry room and tells him that he can get out through the main hall. It's locked though, so I don't know how she expects that to happen. Jack finally got off Ethan's back though, which allows him to see a cop looking through a window. The cop thinks Ethan is a meth head, which, fair, as who else would be living in a house like this, but he agrees to give Ethan his pocket knife and to meet in the garage. In the garage, the cop decides to interrogate Ethan on the spot rather than take him down to the station. I mean, where's my Miranda rights, bro? Jack notices this violation of Ethan's civil liberties and bisects the cop's head, giving Ethan a chance to grab his gun and fight Jack. This fight can end one of two ways though, either Ethan gets in the car or Jack does. If Ethan does, Jack ends up driving it into a wall, causing the car to go up in flames. But if Jack gets in, Ethan has to dodge him until Jack wrecks the car, causing it to go up in flames. Jack doesn't mind that he's currently burning alive, and to prove his point even further, he allows Ethan to blow a chunk out of his head with a pistol. That seemed to have killed him, at least for the moment. Inside the garage is what Ethan needs to get into the main hall, this little ox statue. I wonder if George Trevor, the same guy who built the mansion in the first game, also worked on this rundown house in the middle of nowhere. They share the traits of requiring random objects to open doors. In the main hall, Zoe calls again. She tells Ethan to find his way out of the house so that they can finally meet in person. She also calls Jack Daddy, just like Mia, however in this case, Jack is her actual father. In order to get out, Ethan needs to find 3 dog head busts. Like I said, weird ways to unlock doors. The first one can be found back in the living room, but the other 2 will require some work. In the upstairs of the house, Ethan finds a VHS tape labeled Mia. She just recorded it after they were captured by Jack. It shows her running from Marguerite in a somehow even more rundown house on the property. She recorded the tape to show Ethan where he can find her at, but at the end she's recaptured by the woman. The second dog head is found hidden in a book in that room. Also in the room is a note talking about a ship that crashed in the bayou not far from this house. That's the least of Ethan's worries though, as Jack ambushes him in a bathroom, visibly regenerating his head as he renews the chase. He says that his daughter has given this family a gift which apparently allows them to regenerate like this, but which daughter would that be? Ethan escapes from Jack by doing this little shadow puzzle which opens a space in the wall. The following area is completely overgrown with black mold, to the point where one breath in here would probably insta-kill you. Ethan's fine though, but out of the mold rises the main enemy of this game, giant mold men called Molded. Molded are weird because sometimes they die in like 2 shots, while other times they take 10, but besides the black mold, they have sharp claws and teeth they can use to damage you. You better get used to seeing Molded, because besides the Bakers, they are the only enemy in this game. They do come in a couple shapes and sizes, but this is what I was talking about when I said this game lacks enemy variety. Past the molded is a stairway to the basement, which is huge. They have a whole ass morgue down here. The area is overgrown with mold though, and there are many more of the molded. They seem to not just be piles of mold, rather a dead body that's been taken over by the black mold. The Bakers have killed many more people on this estate, so there's plenty of fuel for this mysterious mold. We find another variant of molded down here, ones that have had one of their hands grow into a massive bladed mask that also doubles as a shield to protect their sensitive face. There are quite a few molded in this basement, but Ethan finds that Jack is down here too. He snatches the dog head relief, muttering about how she wants to replace him with Ethan.
Now she says he will be her father. No. I will find him, and I will make him suffer.
In this large workshop type area where Jack has strung up a few dead bodies and the dog head, he and Ethan have another fight. It starts off the same as the last, however when you do enough damage this massive fleshy weak spot pops out of Jack. When you expose it for the first time, Jack tears down a gate and grabs this massive scissor-like chainsaw. Ethan grabs his own normal chainsaw and the two start trading chainsaw blows. Ethan wins out though and saws directly into that massive weak spot, popping it and the entire upper half of Jack's body. A chainsaw would have been a nice thing to have for the rest of the game, but Ethan breaks it sawing through a bar in the door. He finally has all three dog heads though, so we can finally get outside and see the full breadth of the Baker estate. They have like 4 buildings here. What of interest to Ethan is the trailer sitting in the front lawn. It seems to be Zoe's trailer, but she's not currently home. She does call though and finally tells Ethan what's going on.
My family and our bodies are contaminated. I can't leave the property unless I get it out. And the same goes for Mia.
The Bakers and Mia are infected with that same mold that created the molded, however she thinks that Marguerite has hidden the cure for the mold in the old house, the one Mia was in on the VHS tape. The old house is this rickety wooden place hanging over the water, and the inside is entirely infested by these big biting flies. There are even bigger biting flies hanging out on the walls. All of them are a cross between mold and bot flies, a type of fly which plants its larvae in mammal skin so they can eat their way out. Luckily that doesn't happen to Ethan, in this game anyway. In her video, Mia solved another of those shadow puzzles, however the weird object used to cast the shadows is missing. Ethan first has to build a flamethrower he can use to clear out the fly hives, which lets him find Mia behind a gate. Before he can find his way over to her, Lucas appears behind her and takes Mia away into another room. This is when Marguerite arrives too and begins to stalk the house. If she sees Ethan, she'll unleash a swarm of the flies to chase him. It was actually her that created these flies by infecting them with the mold. He has to avoid Mark to find that shadow object and get into the walls of the building, which are crawling with massive centipedes. I don't think those are mold centipedes or anything, but it's still nasty. This lets him get across a massive hole in the floor and reach the stairway to the second floor, however it's locked by a key that's found on the other side of the house. So he has to dodge the bug lady once again to find the key, however once he does, she ambushes him and pushes him into a hole. Ethan has to hold off her bugs and shoot her in the face until she falls in the hole and starts melting into a big black pool. Finally, Ethan can go upstairs where he finds a suitcase with like a desiccated child's body in it. It has the recipe for how to create the serum. Zoe calls again and Ethan gives her the update. They need 2 things.
A D-series head and an arm. This can't be right.
A head? I think I have that around here somewhere.
You do?
So luckily Zoe has a D-series head laying around, I mean who doesn't, but Ethan needs to find the arm himself. Up here we find a note detailing how a child named Evelyn gave Marguerite the arm for safekeeping, but it's behind a locked door. To get through though, he needs Marguerite's lantern. That should be fine as she's laying dead in the... Ethan follows her to yet another broken down house and we have to fight Marguerite again, except this time her limbs are twice as long and her crotch has become an insect hive. I really don't like this fight because it kind of feels like playing hide and seek, except rather than you hiding from Marge, she's hiding from you. Marge will try to ambush you, but when you do enough damage, she runs away to another part of the house. When she's off screen, she'll give birth to more insect hives. The problem is that since this is Resident Evil, Ethan walks like he's trudging through mud, so you spend most of the fight slowly walking around the house looking for Marguerite, as she does the same for you. I can't rule out the possibility that I'm just bad at the game though. Anyway, Marguerite finally dies, for good this time as she melts away into ash, and Ethan can get her lantern and get into the locked room back at the old house. It's extremely dark and creepy in here, but it seems to be a child's room. Ethan even hears a child's voice as he continues through the house.
Stay away.
At the end of it all though is another weird desiccated body. I'm not sure if this thing is an actual D-series or if the D-series arm's just been stuck onto it, because the arm doesn't really match the rest of the body. You're probably wondering what even is a D-series, but we'll get to that. With the arm in hand, Ethan tries to leave the dark kids room only to first catch a glimpse of the little girl, and then be jump scared by a molded. I played this game twice in a row and that got me both times. Anyway, with the arm, Ethan and Zoe talk again and she says to meet at the trailer so they can combine the arm and head to create a cure for the mold. When Ethan arrives though, Zoe is not there. He's pretty pissed about it, but it turns out she has a good reason.
Now where the hell are you? You know, never mind. We only need the head, and you've got it. This is gonna help me and me, right?
Hey, buddy. I thought you should know. I decided that Zoe needed a timeout.
So Lucas now has both Zoe and Mia, but for Ethan to reach them, he needs to get 2 keycards to open the door to yet another giant building on the Baker property. Like I told you, man, these hillbillies have some money. But first Ethan heads down into the basement where somebody has stashed Granny, and then has to go elbow deep in that dead cop's throat to get a key. A new kind of molded appears around this time, these dog-like ones that crawl around on all fours. They have less health than the others, but are super quick and love to double hit you. The key allows him to get into Lucas's childhood bedroom, where we find that unlike his parents, he was a psycho before the mold got to him. Lucas was a gifted inventor as a child. I mean, not the best, he only got 2nd or 3rd place awards, but at one point he used his skills to trap his childhood bully in the attic of the house until he died of thirst. We don't really know what happened after that because the body is gone and the attic has been renovated with one of those little shadow puzzles, so I don't know. By solving the puzzle, Ethan finds the first keycard he needs to get in. He also finds a VHS tape labeled Happy Birthday, which will allow us to find out what became of Clancy, the cameraman for that ghost hunting show. Before that though, let's see what cruel and unusual tortures the family subjected Clancy to in the Lost Tapes DLC. So these might not be canon, but first Clancy had to play COD Zombies in the basement with Jack. I mean, that one definitely isn't canon. Then he got force-fed Marguerite's rotten food and had to escape her bedroom. And finally had to play strip poker with Lucas, except it's not poker, it's blackjack, and rather than losing clothes, you lose fingers.
Clancy! The loser pays the bet.
This is insane! You can't do this!
Lucas said he would let Clancy go after the blackjack, however the VHS tape shows us that he had one more torture in mind. This time it's an escape room. Lucas isn't trying to be Jigsaw or anything, all he wants Clancy to do is place a lit candle on the birthday cake. The problem is that there's motion-activated water spouts in the doorway, so how can Clancy solve this? Well, step 1 is to reach into a shitty toilet and pull out a little telescope. Washing it off with the water reveals a password on the wall. The password unlocks a little strongbox in the cake room with a straw doll inside of it. While we're here, Clancy can pull out a winding key from the barrel to use on a weird mannequin. Pulling the key out opens the barrel and spills oil out all over the floor, but that's probably not important. Burning the straw doll with a burner that you can also use to light the candle reveals a finger inside. You can put the finger on the mannequin and wind it up. It seems to be trying to write something, but it needs a pen. Clancy can get into another room by burning a rope. The room is filled with balloons and has a password-locked door holding a valve that can be used to turn off the water. Among the balloons is one uninflated one. Rather than using his mouth, Clancy can use this gas spout to inflate the balloon. Except it turns out, the balloon is filled with spikes. One of the spikes, though, was a quill for the doll. Nice, well I'm sure the spike balloon was the worst to come, so Clancy gives the doll the pen and winds it up only for the doll to carve the password into Clancy's arm. The password is loser. I mean, you know Lucas is a real peach sometimes. Finally though, Clancy can unlock the door, grab the valve, shut off the water, and place a lit candle on the cake. Mission accomplished. Great job, Clancy, I'm sure I'll let you go now. Nope, the cake explodes, lighting the oil on fire and burning Clancy alive. Now, why did Ethan just watch a snuff film? You'll see in a minute, but Ethan still needs to find the other keycard. That key Ethan grabbed also unlocks the master bedroom where Granny is sat looking at a picture of Jack in his Marine uniform. How did the decrepit old lady get from the basement to here? I don't know, man, don't bother her, she's old. But by setting up the right time on the clock, the bed moves aside and allows Ethan access to a workshop in the basement. Why did the bakers need this? Who knows? The workshop is full of saws and dead animal parts, but there's also the second keycard laying on a table. With both cards, Ethan enters the building. It's kind of a farmhouse/warehouse type place, and is forced to watch another video from Lucas. As he pulls out his own nails, he gets accosted by that little girl named Evelyn from off-screen. She seems to be the one who gave everyone these mold powers. Anyway, the first part of the warehouse is filled with a shitload of tripwires that Ethan has to dodge. He finally reaches a password-locked door where Lucas taunts him. None of the passwords Lucas gives Ethan work, and Ethan has to go through the side door to find the real one. It takes him to a farmhouse where Lucas has some kind of surprise waiting. The surprise turns out to be a new kind of molded, simply called fat molded. They're gigantic and take a shitload of bowls to kill, however their main form of attack is puking on you. Now, I'm gonna go on a tangent right now, but I was a fat kid. I only lost all the weight my senior year of high school. One thing I always wondered as a kid when I'd be playing zombie games and shit is why they always make the fat zombies puke. Like, think about it, man. Left 4 Dead, Dead Island. The only zombie game I can think of off the top of my head where the fat zombie doesn't puke is Resident Evil 6. I've never understood it. Do people think fat people just puke all the time? I mean, puking is like the opposite of what fat people do. But tangent over. With the fat molded dead, Ethan finds the password to that door. As soon as he enters it, the door locks behind him and Lucas appears to taunt some more. Ethan finds himself in the exact same escape room that Clancy was in. I guess Lucas is really proud of this one. Unfortunately for him though, Ethan watched the tape and already knows the password for the door with the lock on it. This means he doesn't need to use the mannequin at all, which means he doesn't need to pull the winding key out of the barrel. So when Ethan places his candle on the cake, the room doesn't light on fire. Lucas still tries to get him with his Looney Tunes ass bomb, but Ethan uses it to blow a hole in the wall. Lucas flees and we won't see him again till the DLC, but Ethan finds the D-Series head in a room, and then Zoe and Mia tied up in a house on the docks. Mia is just a little delirious, but he frees her and Zoe and gives the latter both ingredients to make the cure. She makes 2 cures, one for herself and one for Mia, but Ethan snatches both for some reason. I think this next part, story-wise, is really the only dumb part in this game. You'll see why. Jack appears again and snatches Ethan, dragging him into this large building for one more fight. Except rather than being his usual balding self, Jack has become this massive eye-covered mold monster and Ethan has to fight him. This fight is a pretty typical Resident Evil one, and you damage Jack by destroying the eyes all over his body. Ethan eventually downs the monster, but as soon as he does, Jack grabs him again. Zoe says Ethan has no choice but to inject Jack with one of the cures, so Ethan obliges. It does seem to kill Jack as he turns to ash just like Marguerite. Here's the dumb part though. Ethan tells the two that he only has 1 cure left and Zoe is like shocked at this fact, as if she wasn't the one who told Ethan to use it on Jack. You have to make a choice here between curing Zoe or Mia. Zoe is also super pissed if you don't choose her, as if she wasn't the one who told Ethan to cure her dad. This choice is so stupid because why in the fuck would Ethan ever choose Zoe over his wife? The player might like Zoe better, but Ethan clearly doesn't. Choosing Mia is canon, and if you choose Zoe she dies anyway, so Ethan cures his wife. The two board a boat and they finally might be able to get out of here, except that they run into that ship that crashed in the bayou a while ago. 3 years ago, in fact. Moldy tentacles rise out of the water and capsize the boat, dragging both Ethan and Mia down. We now play as Mia, as Ethan has been completely immobilized by the mold. Evelyn appears to Mia and keeps making her relive memories that Mia herself doesn't even recognize. Evelyn basically forces Mia to watch a recording to refresh her memory, and this recording reveals a whole lot. Mia was actually on this ship, the Annabelle, transporting Evelyn with her boss Alan. She just up and left Ethan 3 years ago to do this job. I mean, the money must have been crazy. She works for a group called The Connections, an underground BOW seller who was actually founded by a side character from RE5 who appeared in like 3 notes in that game. His name is Brandon Bailey, and long story short, he was in charge of Umbrella's farming of the progenitor virus. He was a pupil of Dr. James Marcus, but he lost pretty much all loyalty to Umbrella when they killed him. When Umbrella collapsed, Brandon took his research and started his own BOW business. Evelyn is a BOW created by The Connections, an E-series. Those weird D-series bodies we found earlier were the failed previous attempts at creating something like Evelyn. To create Evelyn, they basically combined a human embryo with some mysterious black mold that they have created. Evelyn appears like a 10-year-old girl because the BOWs are meant to be able to blend in with refugees and civilians, because why would you ever expect a 10-year-old girl to be a weapon? The Connections couldn't wait 10 years though, so they rapidly accelerated the aging of both the D and E-series BOWs. This causes them to kind of lose their mind, and a couple of D-series actually ended up killing themselves. But what she would do is send in an E-series to infiltrate your enemies, where she would then infect them with the mold and put them under her control, destroying your enemies without a single bullet. That's great and all, but Evelyn escaped and is currently turning the ship's crew into molded. So Mia, who we now know is a secret bioterrorist, has to find Evelyn and stop her before it's too late. She fails at that. Evelyn ends up killing Alan and infecting Mia, and the two of them would then be found by the Baker family when the ship washed up during the hurricane. Of course, Evelyn then infected the Bakers. Bakers kidnapped hundreds of people to add to the mold family, and now we're here. That message Mia sent to Ethan was actually the last thing she ever did before being infected by the mold. Current day Mia finally remembers what Evelyn blocked out, and she needs to make her way through the rusty ship to save her husband. This section really loads Mia up with resources. You can find enough explosives that you basically never have to use guns to kill any molded. Despite that, Mia finds a shitty little pistol and a less shitty SMG as she makes her way through the ship. He finds Ethan at the bottom and starts to dig him out. Ethan, on the other hand, is currently hallucinating himself in the living room with Zach and Joey. Ethan, on the other hand, is currently hallucinating himself in the living room with Jack and Zoe. He says that his family aren't killers. I mean, he's wrong about Lucas, but he tells Ethan the whole story about finding Evelyn.
She infected us with her gift. That's what she calls it. I found her near a busted out tank in the bayou. Everything changed after that.
So she infects you and then she takes control?
No. Not exactly, son. She just... She forces her way into your mind, your soul. You can't fight back.
He begs Ethan to kill Evelyn and free his family just as Ethan wakes up buried in mold. Mia manages to free him from the mold, but she pushes him away and hands him a sample of Evelyn's tissues as the girl takes back control of her. So I guess the whole cure thing was a little pointless, but besides the tissue sample, Mia also donates all of her weapons to Ethan. He's gonna need them too, as Ethan arrives at the entrance to some mines nearby. He hears helicopters overhead and radio chatter from what sounds like the BSAA. Like I said earlier, always late to the party. They mentioned that Lucas has been in contact with the Connections and is currently hiding in the mines. The BSAA squad is heading over to get him, and we'll find out what happened to those guys in a minute. Ethan needs to go through the mines himself, and the area is overrun with molded. Past them though is Lucas's little workstation, and this reveals a lot. First of all is that the Connections gave him something to make him immune from Evelyn's control, but keep the mold powers. This allowed him to keep them updated on what she's doing. The Connections don't seem to want to kill or recover Evelyn. I think they're just kind of looking at this whole situation as kind of a field test for the E-series. They actually provided Lucas with a whole staff of researchers to aid him, but being who he is, Lucas killed them all. One important thing he does know is that Evelyn is starting to look old and wrinkly, which is weird because she looked fine the last time Ethan saw her. The Connections provided Lucas with one last crucial thing, and that is a way to kill Evelyn. Using the tissue sample Mia gave him, Ethan can use this machine to create a serum called E-necrotoxin. It seems to be made by combining Evelyn's DNA with one of the D-series bodies. Necrotoxin is supposed to be like an insta-kill for Evelyn, but Ethan has to find her first. He continues fighting through the mine, culminating with a fight against 2 fat molded at once. Beyond them though, we find that the mine opens directly into the Baker home, which is a little weird, but as soon as Ethan gets inside, Evelyn starts making him hallucinate back to when Mia tried to kill him. Ethan is not to be stopped, and he corners Evelyn upstairs, which she tries to hold him off with these brain blasts. He manages to get through them though, and inject her with the E-necrotoxin, breaking the illusion she put on him.
You.
Why does everyone hate me?
Granny was Evelyn all along. Remember the whole rapid aging thing? This twist is amazing because not a single character ever mentions or addresses Granny in the various spots she turns up in. You kinda just learn to ignore her yourself when you learn that she was Evelyn the entire game. It's great. That necrotoxin was a scam because it doesn't actually kill Evelyn, rather melts her away into a gigantic mold creature that takes over the house. Ethan tries his best to fight her, but it's kinda like that meme with the mushroom where it's like, you cannot kill me in any way that matters. That's how actual mold is, and it's the same with Evelyn. She gets so big that she destroys the entire house. Ethan gets dropped on his head multiple times when the BSA helicopters return and drop an antifungal weapon that they've developed. The weapon, combined with the necrotoxin, finally manages to kill Evelyn. This gun is weirdly named after Albert Wesker, but that makes a little more sense with what we'll learn in a minute. With Evelyn dead, Chris Redfield, although he both looks and sounds different, drops in to rescue Ethan. I think Evelyn was a really good villain, pretty tragic when you consider that she was probably a total of 4 or 5 years old by the time Ethan killed her. The BSA also picked Mia up and the two reunite in the helicopter. Now this is meant to be a happy ending, but like, is Mia going to tell Ethan that she worked for literal terrorists? Personally, that would be reasonable grounds for divorce, but I actually don't think she tells him based on RE8. Anyway, that's the end of the main story of RE7. We have 2 DLCs to recover. The first one is called Not a Hero, and we play as Chris pursuing Lucas through those mines. The previous squad sent after him disappears, so Chris decides to go in alone. Here's the weird part though. All of Chris's gear is provided by the Umbrella Corporation. Whoa, slow down now. They've been gone since 2003, and this game is set in 2017. What the fuck's going on here? Well, the original Umbrella used to have their own department dedicated to researching anti-BOW measures. This was one to provide for their UBCS, the Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service, but I would imagine also to sell anti-BOW weapons in the future. I mean, you can sell one country the BOW, and the other the countermeasure. It's like an infinite money glitch. So after the government shut down Umbrella, they had all this anti-BOW shit laying around, and the government decided to let Umbrella reorganize. They changed their logo to a blue color to try and signify they're trying to be good guys this time around. Oswald Spencer had pretty much all of the remaining original high-level BOW researchers killed. This reorganization would just be the anti-BOW guys and all the business people. Umbrella was forbidden from having their own private army like they used to though, so that's where the BSA comes in. Blue Umbrella sells the BSA gear and provides intelligence on bioterror activities, and in exchange the BSA will go at their beck and call to deal with threats. Chris doesn't much like this relationship, and we'll see in RE8 that he was right not to. The BSA should have known right off the bat because the fancy new pistols Umbrella gave them are named after Wesker, the guy who almost ended the world. For now though, Blue Umbrella is doing a better job than BSA Command ever did. Chris ends up finding 2 of his lost squad members. One of them has a bomb collar on his neck, and the other is Lucas in disguise. He puts one of the bombs on Chris and tells him to fuck off or have his arm blown off. Chris needs to jump through a couple hoops to find Lucas. First is getting an advanced respirator from one of their other squad's guys. To do that, he has to dodge this massive reskinned fat molded called Mama Mold. Rather than being made of black mold though, it's made of white mold, which regenerates faster than normal bullets can kill it. Behind it is a key that he can use to unlock the cell to that BSA agent. However, when he does, Lucas triggers this trap to kill the man. Chris has to take the advanced filter from his severed head and continue. With it on, he can survive the toxic mold spores in the mine run into another white molded, this one called Fumer. The Fumers constantly shed white mold spores and can't be killed with normal bullets either. Chris finds a night vision visor among the spores as well as those antifungal rounds that Ethan just used to kill Evelyn. They're the only way to kill the white molded, but it only takes 1 shot for the little ones. Another white molded variant appears later by an elevator, these tiny little crawlers. They can be killed normally though. Chris finds yet another missing squad member in this room with a shitload of tripwire bombs. You have to shut them off before saving the agent. It turns out to have been pointless though, as Lucas detonates his collar a few steps later. He also arms Chris's bomb to go off, except he gives the man 10 minutes to disarm. Obviously that's just a gameplay thing, but Blue and Brow tells Chris he can find storages of liquid nitrogen in a further area of the mine, which should shut off the bomb. To get it though, he needs to go through that Mama molded. Shooting it with the special bullets only shuts off its regen, and you still need to do a shitload of damage to it. Chris eventually finds it though and finds the liquid nitrogen where he dunks his whole hand into it. It does work, but Chris is probably going to have some lasting damage from that. Chris opens up this massive drill type thing and heads in, but Lucas starts spamming molded at him and then sets up the drill to explode. Chris barely manages to get out, but Lucas assumes he died in the blast. Chris has the element of surprise now as he gets to the secret lab the connection set up down here, and catches Lucas sending emails, then chasing him down into a big central chamber. Turns out Lucas was selling his data on Evelyn to another secret buyer outside of the connections. Lucas ambushes Chris with a knife, he just domes him, causing Lucas to succumb fully to the mold. He becomes this big multi-headed creature. I think he kinda looks like Birkin from RE2. When you do enough damage, Lucas destroys a crate of some kind of toxic gas, forcing Chris to run around to various oxygen stations to refill his tank. Finally though, Chris kills the mutated Lucas and ends the wannabe Jigsaw. He destroys the computer transferring the data, and it seems like this whole Baker incident might finally be over. Except what if I told you Jack Baker had a brother, and his brother was a crazy hillbilly hiding out in the swamp? Well, if I told you that, it'd be true, because that's the second DLC, End of Zoe. It begins with us witnessing Zoe crystallizing in the middle of the woods. A couple of BSA soldiers find her, but Joe Baker finds them.
Call it in to HQ.
Did you say Zoe?
Sir, do you live here?
What the hell's wrong with her?
We're
Zoe!
here to help. So everything...
What in God's name have you done?
Sir. Whoa! Stop! Stop!
Joe is even crazier than his brother Jack, and he knocks out the two BSA soldiers, thinking that they did this to his niece Zoe. He drags her body as well as one of the agents back to his hut in the swamp. The BSA guy tries to tell him that they were trying to cure Zoe, but Joe doesn't have two brain cells to rub together. After a lot of kicking from Joe, the BSA agent finally tells him where he can find a cure for Zoe the BSA have made.
You're lying to me.
Joe decides to head out and find it. Now Joe here has been living in the swamp the entire time, so he's no stranger to molded. I guess he just assumed that they were some kind of new swamp creature, as we can see that he already hunts gators. Joe does not use weapons though. No, instead he just beats the shit out of the molded. The crazy part is that it works arguably better than guns did for Ethan. Joe also heals by mixing bugs like grubs and centipedes with chem fluid. Now I don't know how it works, but it does. So Hillbilly Joe finds the cure Zoe needs, but the BSA agent who had it was attacked by molded and tried to use it on himself before he died. There's not enough left to cure Zoe, but by the time Joe gets back to his shack, he finds it on fire. The BSA guy tells Joe he'll lead him to his base camp to get more, but before he can, he's snatched and killed by a molded. Good job, Joe, you just got that innocent man killed. But he takes Zoe out on a boat, leaving just in time to see some kind of mold man standing in his shack. Joe finds the BSA's base camp and leaves Zoe on a couch outside while he goes in to find the cure. The BSA are all dead. I mean, like I said, man, these guys suck ass at their jobs. Joe finds a note that says BSA moved all the cures to a boat to avoid the molded. As Joe heads to find it, the mold man appears again and attacks him. I say mold man because unlike the molded, this thing is really just a giant moldy human, and rather than using any claws, it just throws hands with Joe. Moldman is not nearly as susceptible to Joe's punches as the normal molded are, but eventually he manages to down it and move on. Joe has to make his way through alligator-infested water. Now if the gators see you, they one-shot you, but Joe can kill them by throwing these stick spears. And I swear this fucking guy's living in 3000 BC, but Joe finally gets onto the ship where the BSA have taken the medicine. It turns out to be kind of an RE3 remake situation, where rather than having the actual medicine, they have a machine to make it. But Joe manages to beat the machine until it successfully creates a dose.
This is it. Finally.
Before he can bring it back to Zoe, Moldman comes back for more. It's time for Moldman fight number 2, and it's much the same as the first. Joe eventually manages to rip the creature's still blinking head off its shoulders and throw it into the water, but by the time Joe reaches Zoe, Moldman has already recovered. It snatches Zoe and retreats into the swamp, forcing Joe to give chase in a boat. After this super annoying section with a shitload of gators, Joe finds Zoe laid out in a church. Moldman appears again and the two fight, with Joe finally realizing who the man is.
Jack? What the fuck?
So Jack is still alive. Evelyn must have reinfected him after Ethan cured him. Jack stuffs Joe in a casket and throws him in the water, which is fucking crazy, but the coffin opens in the water and Joe washes up ashore. Over a radio, he hears the BSA still getting fucked up by Jack and sees more choppers heading towards the Baker house to get him. Well, we all know how good the BSA is at these things, so Joe heads to the house to make sure it actually gets done. Outside the house, he finds a Blue Umbrella prototype, this Power Fist type thing. Blue Umbrella created it to help with lifting heavy loads and shit like that, but Joe has a different use in mind. The molded stand even less of a chance against Joe now with his power fist, and he finds Jack further into the compound. Joe does nothing but shit-talk his brother the entire fight and destroys him with the help of the power fist.
Charge.
You remember me, right? You remember the time I broke your nose when we were kids? You remember when I clotheslined you into the swamp?
Charge.
You never had it in you. You were a whip, Jack. Never could be me. Just 'cause you're lost now, don't mean I can't still kick your ass. This is farewell from the family, brother.
Joe finally ends his brother and gives Zoe the cure, making the two of them the only two surviving bakers. Chris and the BSA bust in, taking Zoe to a medical tent to scrape all that mold off her. Turns out it was Ethan that told the BSA to find Zoe, and this whole thing probably would have gone a lot smoother had Joe not attacked the BSA on sight. But that is the end of Resident Evil 7, and I would definitely hear you out if you said that it's your favorite Resident Evil game. I wouldn't say it's my favorite, but it is an amazing game, but Ethan's story isn't done just yet. Resident Evil 8 takes place in 2021. In the time since the Baker incident, Ethan and Mia have stuck together and they even had a kid. The game begins with Mia reading their daughter Rose a creepy local storybook.
There. She's asleep.
What is with the creepy story? She's only 6 months old.
While Ethan puts his daughter to bed, let me tell you about what happened in between the games. So the BSA entirely covered up the Baker incident, blaming the entire thing on a toxic gas leak, although there's plenty of truthers out there who don't believe it. The BSA decided not to prosecute Mia for her role in all this, but they did make her and Ethan move to a remote location in Romania. It's not actually said to be Romania, but it basically is. The reason for this is that the Connections and other BOW makers would love to hunt them down and probe their heads for all information on the E-series. The BSA also gave Ethan a modest amount of military training in case someone does show up for them anyway. The entire swamp where RE7 took place has been blocked off by the National Guard, and all of the Bakers, including Zoe, were listed as dead. Except for Joe, but we never know what happened to him. As we know though, Zoe is not dead, rather the BSA gave her a new identity and a whole new life. In the present, Mia is completely against even mentioning what happened in Louisiana. Ethan is a pushover, so he just kinda goes with it. However, when they settle down to have a nice dinner together...
Mia, get down! Mia! Chris? What the hell?
So Chris Redfield just executed Ethan's wife and kidnapped his daughter. I mean, what the hell, man? After the BSA knocks Ethan out, he relives a memory of him and Mia talking about how she's worried about him, but she won't tell him why. Ethan wakes up from his memory to find that the BSA car transporting him has been attacked and he's stranded in the snow. Ethan stumbles his way through the bushes, finding dead crows strung up from the trees and hearing someone running around in front of him. Ethan finds a shitty little house, but the only sign of anyone living there is a blood streak on the ground. He continues and finds himself in this rustic little village. The first sign of life is this old guy who's terrified of something getting him. He gives Ethan a gun before having his fears confirmed. Ethan himself gets grabbed and dragged through the floorboards through a crawl space filled with even more dead bodies. The cause of the bodies is this dog man, which immediately chews half of Ethan's left hand off. These things are called lichens, and as you might expect from the name, they look pretty werewolfy. Ethan manages to down this one, but not much further into the village, a whole gang of the things attack him. This game is like RE4 too, so the intro is very similar. Ethan doesn't have the resources this early to deal with 42 lichens, and even more so when this giant hammer-wielding one appears. Ethan ends up taking an arrow to the thigh and being surrounded. A couple of lichens on horses pull up on him, and I'm very disappointed to say that these guys never appear again. Well, Ethan's fucked this time, except before the big man can kill him, something draws all the lichen away, giving Ethan a chance to escape. There's this old lady with a skull staff lurking around, and she recognizes Ethan as Rose's father and says that the baby has been taken by somebody named Mother Miranda.
It's danger. They're coming.
No. Wait. Where's Rose? Who's Mother Miranda?
The bell tolls for us all. They're coming again.
That's about all Ethan gleans from that conversation. However, a couple survivors are sheltering at a woman named Luisa's house nearby. The gates to Luisa's are barred, but in a shack outside her walls, Ethan finds this girl and her dad, who's currently bleeding out from a lichen attack. Her dad is a real asshole, even as Ethan hops the wall and opens the gate into Luisa's for the two of them.
Took your damn time.
Oh, you're welcome.
Another asshole comes to the door and denies them entry until Luisa herself steps in. When they get inside, there is, guess what, another asshole. Maybe these townspeople deserve what they got. The door guard ends up being vindicated though, as the girl's dad turns into a lichen and kills everyone except his daughter and Ethan. In doing so, he knocked over a lantern, so the house is currently burning down. Ethan is determined to save this girl, probably because he just witnessed his own wife get murdered in front of him, but she ends up joining her dad as they both fall into the flaming ruin. Ethan is pretty sad, but determined to find his daughter, who he believes is being held in this massive castle overlooking the village. As he exits Luis's estate, he sees the door guard getting murdered, but who will come to learn is Mother Miranda. Not far from where Miranda appeared, Ethan subjects himself to another of the old hag's rants. Ethan opens the entrance to the castle, but as he steps inside, John Bloodborne attacks him. I'm just kidding, his name is Heisenberg, aka Walter Hartwell White. No, it's actually Carl Heisenberg. He has magneto powers and uses them to encase Ethan in metal and drag him to this gathering of freaks. In the center is Mother Miranda. We know Heisenberg, and you probably also know Lady Dimitrescu, but if you don't, she's the tall lady. The fish thing is Salvatore Moreau, and the doll is being controlled by that veiled woman in the background, Donna Beneviento. We'll learn more about all of them later, but they seem to be like Miranda's children. They're currently debating the best way to kill Ethan. Heisenberg and the lady fight over whether he should die in a death run or be tortured for months. Miranda goes with Heisenberg and he immediately subjects Ethan to that death run. Heisenberg talks over the intercom, but he clearly doesn't have cameras along the path, as we'll soon see. Ethan has to dodge some lichens, including that big guy, and some spike traps before Heisenberg just decides to kill him using this rolling spike trap, like that one that got Squidward. It was meant to be lethal, but Ethan ends up hiding in a nook at the far end and using the trap to remove his handcuffs. That's what I meant when he said he doesn't have cameras, because those four all believe Ethan to be dead. When Ethan steps outside again, he meets my goat, the Duke. I mean, I love the Duke. He's a lot like the merchant from RE4, and apparently they even know each other.
What are you buying? Just something an old friend of mine used to say.
But you might have noticed the fact that he's fucking huge, not just being extremely fat, but also like 10 feet tall. Later on in the DLC, we get to see what the Duke looks like next to a normal person, and it's insane. Now, when I first played this game, I was sure the Duke was in Ethan's imagination, and that still could be the case. However, he has his own little shack back in the village, although he doesn't use it, and a couple of notes mention him from other characters, so he's definitely real in some way. The reason why I thought he isn't is because he just appears at various locations, some of which there's no way he could even have fit into. Who knows, but Ethan ends up entering the giant castle through a side door. The castle belongs to Lady D, the vampire lady, as well as her 3 daughters. We get to meet those 3 just inside as swarms of flying insects coalesce to form 3 women. I'm gonna say something kind of weird here, but I feel like I hired like girlfriend ASMR actresses to play these 3. I mean, just listen to them.
Then let's devour his man flesh quickly, Mother.
I am the one who captured him.
My throat, it's so dry.
Anyway, their names are Bella, Cassandra, and Daniela. Anyway, one of them skewers Ethan through the ankle and drags him to the lady, where she samples some of his blood.
Starting to go a little stale.
Then let's devour.
She then has her daughter string Ethan up with hooks in his hands and leaves to update Mother Miranda. Well, Ethan's missing half of one hand, but it is unfortunate that they finally has to injure his good hand. No harm, no foul though, as he can just pour a little of that green juice on it to heal with. Ethan goes downstairs to find that the Duke has squeezed himself into this room in her castle, one that's been set up for a while. Himself and the lady are business partners, however the Duke doesn't mind telling Ethan that he should check her bedchamber to see if Rose is there. On the way, Bella catches up with Ethan and attacks. There's a really gross part where some of her bugs get into his hand and burst their way out. Shooting her does nothing, as she's just a swarm of flies, so Ethan has to run for now. He gets into the basement/dungeon of the castle where there are a bunch of weird bloody torture devices. The victims of the torture are these zombie things called Morrowica, named after the Moroi, which is a type of vampire in Romanian folklore. These ones are the former maids of the castle who either disappointed the lady or were chosen to try to become one of her daughters. What they ended up as, though, are these mindless vampire creatures. So at this point in the game, you're led to believe that vampires, werewolves, and giant teleporting fat men are just a thing in Resident Evil now, but there is an explanation. We don't get that explanation for a while though, but I will say that the mold is involved. Anyway, as Ethan leaves the dungeon, Bella catches up with him and chases him to the kitchen. She pins him to the ground to drain his blood, but Ethan accidentally shoots out a window, flooding the room with cold air. Bella and her sisters are all made of a type of blowfly infected with the mold that can't handle low temperatures. When Ethan shoots out the window, it solidifies her body and allows him to kill her pretty easily. I mean, 1 daughter down, 2 to go. After killing Bella, Ethan can hear Lady D discover her body and swear vengeance, but I'm sure she's just bluffing.
What have you done to my daughter?
After another bloody basement, Ethan finds himself creeping on Dimitrescu from outside her window. She's on the phone with Mother Miranda. Miranda seems to have some kind of plan for Ethan and tells her to capture Ethan, but she's determined to kill him for what he did to her daughter. When she leaves the room, Ethan skulks in, but she must have forgotten something inside. She grabs Ethan and shoves him through the floor, sending the man tumbling back down into the dungeons.
Filthy man-hands on my daughters, and now you even try to steal my property. How dare! Rest while you can, because I will hunt you, and I will.
Well, no problem. We just need to open this gate to get out, and
Like I'd let you get away.
damn, so now both of Ethan's hands have been chopped off before. Ethan has to dodge the lady to first recover his hand and then make it onto this elevator to take him out of the dungeon. As the elevator goes up, Ethan decides to reattach his hand, and just like his foot, it's as simple as pouring a little of that herb juice on it. At this point, both the lady and her daughters are pursuing Ethan, but Daniela ends up cornering Ethan in a library. Well, she must not know about the giant sunroof in that place, because Ethan can just open that up, flood the room with cold air, and kill the second daughter of Lady Dimitrescu. The goal this entire time was to find 4 statue heads, a mask of joy, grief, sorrow, and rage. To get one of them, Ethan has to get onto the roof of the castle. Inhabiting the roof are these bat-slash-gargoyle-like creatures called Samka, after another folklore creature. They look like even further mutated Morowaika. Ethan ends up fighting the last of the daughters, Cassandra, in a storeroom where another mask is being held. She actually chose the best place to ambush him as there's no windows or a sunroof, however Ethan uses a pipe bomb to blow open a wall and kill the final member of the Dimitrescu family. With all 4 masks in hand, Ethan puts them on their pedestals and opens a path out of this place, one that leads to a dusty cathedral next to the castle. In a coffin in the center of the church is the dead body of some ancient hero. He's clutching onto a dagger that was doused in all the most potent poisons they had back then. As soon as Ethan grabs the dagger, Lady D ambushes him from behind, stabbing Ethan in the stomach but being stabbed herself by that dagger. It doesn't kill her right away, rather making her lose her tall lady form and become this giant fuck-ass dragon. So Lady D was the heir to this ancient noble family who ruled the castle and the village underneath it. However, she had some kind of rare illness that caused her to blister in the sun and to drink blood in order to survive. So vampires are kind of canon in Resident Evil. However, she only became 8 feet tall and superpowered after an experiment performed on her by Miranda. What experiment that is, we'll learn in a while. Anyway, I'm not a fan of this boss fight because I think it's super wasted having her transform into a giant dragon. I mean, don't get me wrong, the dragon looks amazing, but I think fighting her as like a flying bat creature or something would have been a lot better. Anyway, when Ethan does enough damage to her, the floor beneath the two of them collapses, dragging them both down back towards the village and killing Lady D once and for all. In the ancient tower they fell through, there's this mysterious jar or flask laying on a pedestal. Ethan runs into the hag again on his way back to the village, where she says that Miranda's plan is to sacrifice Rose to revive someone else. She also leaves this winged key laying around, and we'll need to upgrade that key a couple times to progress through the game. Ethan ends up at this ancient ceremony site where there's another pedestal, this one with the Umbrella logo on it. These ruins are far older than Umbrella, so how did their logo get here? Well, we'll find out, but I think it's kind of stupid, honestly. I think it's clear the original Umbrella logo was based off the Iron Cross, which makes sense because all of its founders were big Nazi fans. But like I said, we'll find out. Ethan reunites with the Duke in the central area outside the village, and he tells Ethan what's inside of that flask he found.
Why, you have your daughter right in your own hands.
What are you saying?
Take a closer look.
The Duke doesn't fully explain how exactly Ethan's infant daughter's head ended up inside that flask, but he tells Ethan to go to a specific house in the village to find answers. The village has been completely overrun with Lycan, including these big ones wearing armor. Inside the house are not the answers Ethan seeks, but there is the first upgrade to the winged key, making it a 4-winged key instead. This is what the Duke wanted Ethan to find. When Ethan goes back to the merchant, he tells Ethan how he can save his daughter, by recovering all 4 rose flasks from the lords of the village.
You said you would.
Settle down. First, you must use that key and collect all of your little roses flasks.
Where are the rest of them?
There are 4 in total. You have the one, and the other lords have the rest.
Lords?
Mother Miranda is the cold, calculating ruler of this village. 4 lords serve under her. The first you've already met, the Lady Dimitrescu. The second lives deep in a valley of mist, the doll maker, Donna Beneviento. The third is Moreau, a being of twisted flesh that lives in the reservoir past the windmills. The fourth and most dangerous is Heisenberg. He works in his factory on the village outskirts.
The Duke marks the location of the remaining 3 lords and tells Ethan to get to it. It seems he's entirely switched sides despite being clearly infected with the same thing everyone else has. Each time you kill a lord, you can sell their crystallized remains to the Duke, so I think his motivation might just be that Ethan will make him a whole lot more money than Miranda ever did.
Oh, Lady Dimitrescu. Beautiful even in death. That waistline, yes.
For a while, I thought that the Duke might actually be Mother Miranda, which should make sense later, but the ending of the game kinda disproves that. Anyway, first on the list is Donna Beneviento, and the way to her secluded estate is extremely foggy and creepy. As Ethan approaches, he starts hallucinating Mia and Rose, and in order to get to the house, he has to give up a picture of the two of them together. That allows him to reach House Beneviento, and rather than being a giant castle, it's a cozy little place. I mean, the lights are a little too warm for my liking, and the wallpaper is musty and peeling, but I'd live here. Ethan takes an elevator into the pretty extensive lower floor, but as he steps into Donna's doll-making workshop, the lights go out, and Ethan loses all of his weapons. This next part is straight up horror, no survival involved, but basically there's this mannequin of Mia laying on a table, and Ethan has to dismantle it to find various items needed to progress. On one arm is a symbol for a door, in a leg is a music box winding key, on her hand is a wedding ring with their marriage date on it, and inside her is an arm. Using the key gives Ethan access to a sink where he can wash off the wedding ring and use his wedding date as a password to exit the room. I mean, you should probably just remember that, Ethan, but whatever. That lets him get out and into the hallway where he can find a music box that was a gift from Mia's grandma when they got married. The box has a pair of tweezers inside that can be used to pull a reel of photos out from the doll's mouth. Taking the photos to a projector and lining them all up shows this creepy video of somebody going down a well. It reminds me of The Ring. It also opens a passage in the wall which gives Ethan a pair of scissors. The scissors cut off the bandages on the Mia doll, and by removing one of his fake wife's breasts, Ethan finds the last thing needed to open this door. Beyond the door is where that creepy well video was taken, and Ethan finds the key for a breaker box just in time for the lights to go out. You can hear a baby crying, and in the hallway is an umbilical cord leading to... Ethan has to hide from a giant baby monster, the entire time the monster uttering things like Dada. It's actually pretty creepy. Being a giant baby monster though, it's not very fast and can be easily avoided. Ethan opens the breaker box but it's missing a fuse. It does have this little baby relief though. That can be used on this door on the other side of the house, which opens the way to the fuse. However, upon taking it, the lights go out and the baby reappears. Ethan has to hide from it again to get to the elevator and give it power. There's a scripted sequence where it really seems like the baby's about to get you. Good stuff. When he gets back upstairs, Ethan finds Donna herself as well as a shitload of her dolls, the most important of which is the one in white, Angie. Ethan needs to find Angie at various points in the house, so while he's doing that, let's talk about who Donna Beneviento is. So her family were one of the original founders of the village alongside the Dimitrescu family. In recent times, however, they've been plagued by mental illnesses. Both of Donna's parents committed suicide and she became extremely antisocial, only speaking through her doll, Angie. Anytime Ethan finds Angie, he stabs her in the head, slowly revealing this parasite inside of it. This parasite is called Cadu, or gift in Romanian, and we'll come to learn that it's the source of everything we've seen so far. What Donna did with her parasite is split it among all of her dolls, giving her the ability to control them with her mind. If Ethan doesn't find Angie fast enough, the rest of the dolls will come to life and kill him. On the third go at stabbing Angie, the illusion finally breaks and Ethan kills Donna herself. So there was no giant baby monster or Mia doll. Donna used a certain type of flower to induce these hallucinations and try to kill Ethan. She failed though, and after killing her, Ethan gets an upgrade for his key, making it the four-winged Unborn key, as well as finding another flask. If you do a little treasure hunt, you can find one of these axe-wielding giants by a grave in Donna's land. These are called Urias Drak, which means devil giant according to the wiki, or huge fuck according to Google. I mean, either is accurate. Anyway, with 2 flasks in hand, it's time to hunt down Moreau. However, on the way, Ethan gets mauled by an actual werewolf. It's called Varkalak, which is the Romanian word for werewolf, and it mauls the fuck out of Ethan. You can either hide from it and go building the building or kill it head on, but these were created by injecting wolf blood into a normal lichen. The man behind this experiment is Salvatore Moreau himself, however his domain is covered in this green mucus that you have to clear out. Moreau was once a doctor, however when Ethan finds him he's just staring into a TV full of static. Ethan manages to grab the flask from Moreau, who isn't paying much attention, but he ends up turning around and seeing Ethan. Sal here is pretty pathetic, however he does manage to distract Ethan long enough to block off the exit with more of that green mucus. Ethan ends up getting on a boat and sees this massive fish monster patrolling the waters, but more interestingly is that he finds a research outpost with modern technology. It turns out to belong to Chris as he once again attacks Ethan and gives him no explanation why. Before Ethan can interrogate him too hard though, the giant fish thing bursts through the wall, separating Ethan and Chris and destroying their nice little lab. Ethan falls in the water and washes up on a dock nearby. Moreau is there too and we get to see him in all his glory.
Shit! Stay back!
The exit's underwater. You're done.
I don't have time for this. Miranda sent you to slow me down? You're pathetic.
His body is covered in big lumps and eyes, and Moreau seems to be in constant pain. Moreau pukes on Ethan before falling into the water and transforming into that giant fish monster. The mutated Moreau will pop out to attack Ethan at various points, and there's really nothing he can do about it. What he can do, though, is drain the water and beach that fuck, but to do so we need to get a crank for a windmill to power on the gate. That has Ethan dodging Moreau's attacks all over the dock, on a raised ship, and finally on another windmill that he can steal the crank from. Taking it back to the other one powers it up and allows Ethan to drain the water. Moreau is pretty unfazed as he starts crawling around on the ground, but Ethan chases him to this little unearthed town where we finally get to fight him. He looks a little like Irving's mutated form in RE5, with his actual body sticking out of the fish's mouth. I think of the giant monster fights in this game, this is the only justifiable one. Anyway, the fight is pretty simple. The only standout part to mention is that sometimes Moreau will climb onto a building and puke acid all across the battlefield. The Moreau family was also one of the founders, and they seem to have been the town's doctors. Salvatore might have been a good doctor, but we'll never know because the Kadu parasite not only made him a disgusting fish creature, but also extremely stupid. Ethan manages to kill Moreau though and can finally escape with a third flask of rose. There's also another key addition here making it a 6-winged unborn key. As soon as Ethan grabs the key, Heisenberg starts talking to him over a TV in the mines, offering to work with Ethan. He tells Ethan that he left his flask in a stronghold outside the village. Heisenberg even built these massive signs to point Ethan's way. On the way to the stronghold is this lumber mill with another of the axe giants inside, but at the stronghold we find that maybe Heisenberg isn't that friendly after all. This place is the home of the Lycans and there's a shitload of them in here. After fighting past a monumental amount of normal Lycan, Ethan finally gets to have a fair fight with a giant that assaulted him earlier. It's just called Urias, or Huge in English, and it's not nearly as tough when Ethan is properly armed to fight it. Ethan kills Urias and finds the final flask of rose, getting another talk with Heisenberg once he does. He tells Ethan to place the flasks on that altar near the Duke, which should open the way to Heisenberg. Placing all 4 flasks give Ethan this giant chalice, which can then be used to raise a bridge out of the water. Ethan will just have to leave his daughter's body parts laying there for a while as he arrives at Heisenberg's little family-owned factory. You might be able to guess by now, but his family were also the founders in the village. He's also voiced by the same guy who did Asterion in Baldur's Gate 3. I mean, he does a good job, but I think the voice and the appearance are kind of a mismatch. Anyway, Ethan goes inside and comes face to face with Heisenberg, where he pitches an alliance between them to take down Miranda. He's bitter at what Miranda made him into. It's a little weird because of the 4 lords, he definitely got the best powers from the Kadu parasite, but I'll let him speak for himself.
Listen, Ethan, you're being played.
What are you talking about? You think this is a game?
I said sit! Lady, supersized bitch. Ugly ass psycho doll. And that moronic freak. Don't you get it? It's a test. To see if you're strong enough to be a part of Miranda's family.
I don't want to be a part of Miranda's family.
Neither did I, but here we are. And I'm next in line, right? Kill me, move up the chain. Well, fuck that!
Ethan denies Heisenberg and ends up getting kicked down this hole with a massive propeller-headed man at the bottom. Ethan has to flee from the propeller head and ends up getting dumped in an actual factory. Now, rather than being a small little steel mill or whatever, Heisenberg has entire conveyor belts of these seemingly cyborg zombies. Now, I think Ethan turning down Heisenberg is kind of a weird choice. I mean, he was right to, because we can find a note that all but confirms Heisenberg plans to turn him and Rose into cyborgs, but Ethan didn't know that. I guess the reason why he did it was because Heisenberg threw him in that death run earlier, but it's whatever. The next section has Ethan trying to escape Heisenberg's factory, which involves powering on this elevator. The Duke has had himself on said elevator so you get to ferry him around between the various floors. So there's those simple little cyborg forms of the Moroeka, but also the more advanced Soldat cyborgs. They're basically Cadu parasite patients with added machinery to control them and make them stronger. There's Soldat Ions, which has one drill arm and an easily accessible reactor to destroy. Soldat Y has 2 drills and a reactor on its back. Soldat Jet has a cool helmet and a jetpack on its back, and Soldat Panzer is a walking tank. The only way to reach its reactor is to blow off its armor. Heisenberg yaps at Ethan over the intercom the entire time, but at the end, waiting for Ethan is another fight with Propellerhead. His name is actually Sturm, and I think he's the result of Heisenberg just kind of fucking around. The only way to damage Sturm is by hitting his reactor on the back, and when you do, it ends up lighting his engine on fire, allowing him to shoot out pillars of fire at you. But Sturm isn't too much of a challenge, and killing it allows Ethan to come face to face with Heisenberg, although he looks very different. Heisenberg, now as a giant metal monster, knocks Ethan down to the bottom of the factory, but on his way up, Chris reappears. Finally, Chris explains himself. Now, why couldn't he do that from the start? I don't know.
We're in the way.
What do you care, Chris? You killed my wife, you son of a bitch!
You think I killed Mia? That wasn't her. It was Miranda.
What?
She's a bioweapon. She changed her appearance and pretended to be Mia. Seems she also survived being shot, so now I'm here to finish the job.
Bullshit! Why don't you fucking tell me right away?
Because I knew you would want to be involved. And this job is hard enough without civilians getting in the way.
Chris reveals that Miranda has collected the Rose Flask, but Chris says his team is on top of it. While Chris stays and blows up Heisenberg's factory, Ethan can use a special polymer blend tank to fight Heisenberg. Apparently Heisenberg built this tank. Now why would he build a weapon capable of killing him? I don't know. The tank's material makes it immune to Heisenberg's magnetic power, so Ethan rides an elevator up to the scrapyard and we can finally fight the mutated Heisenberg. I think this is the worst of the giant boss fights in this game, because imagine how much cooler it would have been to have a boss fight against Bloodborne and Magneto. Anyway, Chris ends up blowing up the entire factory, distracting Heisenberg and allowing Ethan to get the upper hand. Carl tries to take notes from his child Sturm with a giant propeller, but Ethan destroys it and kills Heisenberg in the process.
This can't be the end for me! I must kill her!
Ethan gets a call from Chris, but he's interrupted when Mia appears in front of him. Although, as we can now guess, that's Miranda. Miranda reveals that not only was she Mia, but also the old hag in the village.
And you are truly a special case. But I've learned all I can. Your worth as a lab rat has run out.
Miranda! You coward! Come out and face me!
Don't worry. Your death will come quick. You will join the Megamycetes records.
Miranda finishes Ethan by ripping out his still beating heart, and unfortunately, the green herb can't fix that. We switch to playing as Chris, one of his team members reporting Ethan's death to the man. Chris's team sees the BSA rolling in and we find that Chris isn't actually with them anymore. He just says they've gone too far. This next section has Chris and his team fighting through a shitload of lichen as they approach the mold overgrown village, so while they do, there's a lot we need to talk about. So after RE7, Chris left the BSA, we'll see why in a minute. He's now gone rogue with an elite BSA squad called Hound Wolf Squad. It was Chris that discovered Miranda was trying to get to Ethan and steal Rose. The BSA had no clue as they suck at their job. Even now, they're just rolling up as Miranda's about to win, and as always, they're getting their asses kicked. So who is Mother Miranda and what exactly is she doing here? Well, Miranda was born in the village around the late 1800s or early 1900s. She was a biologist and her life was going pretty well. In 1909, she had her first and only child, a daughter named Eva. This all took a turn though when in 1919 her daughter died to the sickness ravaging the world at the time, the Spanish flu. Much of the village died then, but Miranda was so distraught by this that she intended to take her own life. Before she could though, she ran into what she calls the Megamycete in a cave near the village. Miranda believed it to be a godlike being which she called the Black God, however it was actually a super colony of the Black Mold. Given their proximity to it, all of the villagers had been exposed to the mold in some way, although there was no Evelyn to spread it like in Louisiana. Miranda came into contact with the Megamycete, which showed her that it cataloged all the memories and personalities of everyone who died in proximity to it, including Miranda's daughter. So Miranda's mission became to use the mold to find a human who would be the perfect vessel for her daughter. He first created the Cadu parasites by infecting a type of parasitic nematode with the mold, and then used them to experiment on the villagers. Most people infected with the parasite just died. Those who had a higher affinity became lichens, Barcolax, or Urias. However, there were a couple people who had a very high affinity. Moreau was not one of those people, however the parasite did have the strange effect of making him into a toxic fish monster. Lady D had a high affinity to the parasite, which allowed her to grow in size and be all but invincible as long as she had enough blood to consume. If she didn't, though, she would mutate out of control and turn into a giant monster like the one Ethan fought. Donna Beneviento also had a high affinity and didn't become a giant monster, however Miranda thought her mental illness disqualified her from being a good vessel for Eva. Heisenberg had the highest affinity, which gave him his powers, however he wasn't a good fit probably because he's a man. We can presume that the Duke was also implanted with the Cadu and had a good affinity, although there's no way Miranda would want to put her daughter in that body. So that brings us to the present, where Chris uses the mortar strike to destroy a mold overgrowth and drop down into the root of the fungus. Protecting it is the bigger and stronger brother of Urias, Urias Strazier, or Huge Guard. He's completely bulletproof besides the parasitic lump on his back, and the best way to damage him is to call a mortar strike down on that lump. He's no match for Chris, and he continues on, where he comes face to face with the Megamycete. It kind of looks like a giant fetus, which is a little strange, but Chris plants a pretty small bomb for how big of an explosion it causes, and continues on to find Miranda. He finds Miranda's lab beyond it, where there are reports on the Four Lords and her other experiments. There's also a note, which I think is probably the most unnecessary bit of lore they added to this game. It says that Oswald Spencer, founder of Umbrella, visited Miranda in his youth and got the idea to farm the progenitor virus from her experiments with the mold. That's also where the Umbrella logo came from. Like I said, stupid because the Umbrella logo is very clearly the Iron Cross. Whatever, the biggest find down here is that the real Mia is still alive and being held in a cell. Chris tells her about Ethan's death, but she doesn't believe it.
What do you mean he's gone?
He's dead. I'm sorry, Mia, but we have to leave. We have to destroy this village.
No! You're wrong. I tried to keep this a secret, but... you don't understand how special he is.
We cut back to Ethan, and he seems to be having his life flash before his eyes, except rather than reliving his best moments from his life, it's just Evelyn. Evelyn finally reveals a twist that's very obvious in retrospect, but really got me the first time I played this game.
3 years ago, the Baker house. You were murdered by Jack. You died there 3 years ago.
What else? I did all that.
Now do you get it? Your whole body is nothing but mold.
Ethan is a molded. In the first game, Evelyn wanted to replace Jack and Marguerite with Ethan and Mia, so she would have infected Ethan with a very clearly stronger version of the mold that Jack had. That's how he could reattach his limbs, and that's how he's taking about 10 fatal injuries over the course of this game without a thought. Mia knew this, which is why she was so concerned about Ethan in the beginning of the game. But in the real world, the Duke picked up Ethan's lifeless body and is carrying him around in the back of his carriage. Ethan asks Duke to take him to Miranda to save his daughter, and the Duke lets him know that it'll likely be the last thing he ever does.
But Ethan, are you sure of this? Your body is, well, falling apart.
Yes.
Foolish of me to ask.
Speaking of foolish questions, who or what are you?
Even I can't quite answer that.
Ethan is determined, and with one final goodbye to the goat, he heads to the ceremony site where Miranda is trying to transform his daughter into her own. Ethan seems to arrive too late, but the ritual didn't work anyway. Miranda recognizes that the baby is still Rose, not her Eva. Ethan finally catches up with Miranda, and the two molded fight over the baby, Miranda growing into the six-winged angel creature. This fight reminds me a lot of the final boss from Resident Evil Revelations because it's actually a really good boss fight. You have to actually dodge her attacks, it has phases, I mean it's good shit, man. The first phase she's just walking around, the second she starts crawling like a spider, the third she flies, and the fourth she makes the arena all dark and you have to dodge her until the fog clears up. In the final stage she switches between her different forms constantly. But Ethan is on a mission, so he finally kills Miranda, sending her to join her daughter.
My daughter! My
The mold Miranda used to cover Rose finally fades away, reuniting Ethan with his daughter after the horrible day he's had trying to find her. Unfortunately, even molded have their limits, so Ethan too starts melting away into dust. Chris catches up to Ethan as the Megamycete rises out of the ground. He tries to drag Ethan to their escape chopper before blowing up the mold, but Ethan can't make it.
You hear me? alive.
Mia, I'm so sorry. I love you. Keep Rose safe.
Hey. And you tell yourself. Now come on, it's not that much further.
Watch over her. Teach her to be strong.
Even as he's dying, the game still doesn't show with Ethan's face, which becomes a lot goofier in the DLC. But in his last moments, Ethan gives Rose to Chris and takes the detonator with him. Chris, Rose, and Mia all get to the escape helicopter just before Ethan detonates the charge, killing both himself and the mold that ruined his life. Very sad. I actually really liked Ethan as a character. The last moments of the story reveal why Chris left the BSAA.
Captain, you need to see this. BSAA didn't send soldiers. This is a bioweapon.
What the hell were they thinking?
They're using BOWs, specifically zombie soldiers. We don't have an explanation for this just yet, but I think it's pretty clear that Blue Umbrella managed to sell the BSAA on the idea of using their own bioweapons and restarting their BOW manufacturing. It seems we've come entirely full circle, with Umbrella Corporation creating zombies to sell to the military. I think this plotline is super interesting, and I really hope they don't drop it in the next game. But with that being said, it's never mentioned in the DLC, which happens 16 years after this game. The DLC is called Shadows of Rose, and we play as a 16 to 17-year-old Rose, which means this game is set in 2037. It begins with Rose meeting up with one of Chris's squad members. Apparently Chris has been trying to recruit her for a while. Rose refuses, although her life kinda sucks. She's gotten bullied pretty much her entire life for being a freak. Those kids don't know the half of it, but what they do know is that Rose sweats out white mold when she gets nervous. I don't support bullying, but that's definitely something that would get you picked on in school. Chris's man proposes to her a way that she can get rid of her powers, which of course Rose wants nothing more than. He says that Miranda discovered a crystal that could be used to entirely remove the mold from someone. To get that crystal though, Rose has to actually enter the inner world of the Megamycete. She agrees and connects with a small piece of the Megamycete that was recovered from the explosion. First she relives her memories of getting bullied before getting dropped into what seems to be the dungeon in Castle Dimitrescu.
Yeah, it's like she sees things that aren't there. Creepy. Stay away from us, you freak. Imagine wanting to be friends
She's
with her.
definitely
Ew, something just moved on her hand. What's wrong with her?
Rose has no idea what's going on, but there's somebody behind a locked door who might actually have some answers. There's these squirming pools of mold on the ground, but Rose eventually grabs the key and frees the woman, only for it to be a copy of her. The clone gives Rose no answers and just says they need to escape. They get into another room which has many more Rose clones locked in cells and a shitload of dead clone bodies. Rose grabs a handle to open another door, but when she returns to her clone, she finds it getting attacked by this white mold zombie that seems to suck her face off. Rose can shoot out little energy blasts from her hands, but she doesn't know how to do it consistently yet, so she has no choice but to flee from the horde of face eaters gathering behind her. They make a sound that I think sounds like Muscle Man from Regular Show. But Rose gets cornered by them, but some kind of golden energy makes a wall disappear and guides her escape. She gets out of the dungeon into the actual castle where the gold energy writes on the walls to communicate with Rose. It says that it's trying to protect her and decides on the name Michael, like the Archangel. Rose moves out into the main castle where a familiar voice can be heard from the throne room.
Looks like we caught another.
Now, I don't know if Evil Duke is bigger than Normal Duke, because we never see Normal Duke grab anyone like that, but holy shit, this man is massive. It seems that Evil Duke is behind the Face Eaters, which he sends en masse after Rose when she trips onto the door.
This? Oh, now we have a new little rabbit to pursue.
With the help of Michael, she escapes most of them, and he even decides to manifest a gun for her. I mean, you could have done a Magnum or something, Mike, but it's better than nothing. Rose needs to find 3 masks to unlock a statue that holds the purifying crystal she needs inside. There's these fungal growths blocking off certain areas in some of the masks. Michael says Rose can destroy them with her powers, but she needs to find an amplifier. The amplifier turns out to be these little white flasks that resemble the Rose flasks from the main game, but they allow Rose to channel her powers into destroying the mold overgrowths. Remember that this is all in the mind of the Megamycete, so anything is possible. With her newfound power, Rose gets the first flash from the courtyard. She can find a note from Evil Duke that implies that someone woke up the Duke's consciousness in here for the purpose of hunting down these Rose clones, who are in turn trying to steal his crystal. It's not the actual Duke though, I mean, he would never. Rose finds a second flash that allows her to use her powers to stun enemies and break out of their grab attacks. Unlike her dad, Rose can block everything with her forearms. The second mask can be found in a basement storeroom, however once she finds that the Duke spawns in another enemy to hound her. It's this giant multi-headed creature called the Executioner. Bullets have no effect on it, and the most Rose can do is stun it with her powers to escape. The Executioner hounds Rose a little more, but as soon as she manages to grab the third flask, it gets behind her and knocks her out. Rose wakes up in a cell surrounded by giant mold growths. The Duke tells her over the intercom that the mold will expand and crush her in 3 minutes. Rose has to find the real cores among the fakes and destroy the mold before it kills her. Luckily, Michael knows which are real and fake, and with his help, Rose manages to destroy the mold before she's crushed. There's nothing stopping her now from placing the 3 masks and claiming the crystal, except it's fake.
Well done, little one. You've more than earned this reward. Almost looks like the real thing, doesn't it?
Evil Duke teleports Rose into this arena in the basement where she has to fight the Executioner, who for some reason grows a weak spot for the occasion. This fight sucks ass because Rose walks so insanely slow, and unlike Ethan, she can't block any attacks. So really what you do is have to just jog around the centerpiece until you can pop his weak spot for the first time. Then another path opens up as well as 2 face eaters, so you have to also jog around them. I'm really not a fan, but once Rose kills it, the Duke spawns in a horde of face eaters, forcing Rose to jump off a cliff to avoid them. She comes to on the path to Beneviento's manor, deeper into the Megamycete world. Michael urges her to leave, but Rose is determined to get rid of her mold powers. As Rose approaches the manor, some other power manages to block out Michael, leaving her all alone. It turns out there is no manor this time, and an elevator going up drops her right off in the basement, which is now filled with giant teddy bears, the Stuffy being Rose's only childhood friend. We find a kind of sad note here, which says how Chris had to talk to one of Rose's teachers to tell her that Rose's mold sweat wasn't dangerous. The final page of the note says that Rose thinks she finally found a friend, but we're about to witness how that ended up for her. When Rose arrives in the room, they held the Mia doll in the main story. This time it has her teddy bear on the table with something inside its stomach. Rose finds some scissors to cut it open and get the same relief of a child, but then the scene changes to what seems to be Rose getting burned at the stake. Rose needs to gather 4 different dolls to complete the scene and burn her own doll. The entire time there's a familiar young girl's voice taunting her.
You know how to play with dolls, don't you?
She'll find the dolls at various scenes of her getting bullied by her classmates and the girl who she thought was her friend. The Mia mannequin will appear at random places to jump scare you as well, but I'm sure that's nothing. The first one has 2 girls trying to clean Rose with a mop in the bathroom, the second has 3 kids doing the old bucket of water trick, and the third has her getting burned at the stake, which that one probably didn't actually happen. The fourth doll she finds though is unlike the rest of the porcelain dolls, instead it's a girl with black hair. Once Rose completes the burning scene, she gets a key to the breaker box, which gives her a map of where she can find a fuse for the elevator. Unlike Ethan, she will not be chased by a giant baby monster. Instead, Rose gets chased by those Mia mannequins. It's pretty simple. They won't move while you're looking at them, but it's complicated when there's 3 chasing you at once. It's pretty fun, honestly, but taking the elevator up only takes Rose further into the nightmare. This time, she is the size of a doll and has to avoid murderous floating dolls and the giant mannequins in this house. The little girl tells her that if she reaches the bedroom, she'll hand over the crystal. This part is also fun, but at the end, Rose gets chased by another giant mannequin until Michael manages to find her and save her. Michael transports Rose into Ethan and Mia's house in Romania to show her some of Ethan's memories so that she can actually get to know her dad.
She's so little. Hard to believe one day she'll be old enough to share a bottle of wine with her old man.
So Dad was a wine drinker.
He finds a really sappy poem Ethan wrote for her before he died, but Evelyn appears to attack Rose again. She was the one behind the whole doll thing. Evelyn's mind is still alive within the Megamycete as well, and she hates Rose or the fact that Mia loves her more. Evelyn throws everything she has at Rose, but Michael manages to save her at the last moment. Michael tells Rose that she can destroy Evelyn's consciousness by using her powers on her, so it's time for kind of a boss fight. Rose has to hide behind cover from Evelyn's mind blast so she can get a chance to hit Evelyn with her own powers. I kinda wish this fight would have happened in the Baker house rather than the starting house in this game, but it's whatever. Rose manages to weaken Evelyn, but it's not enough. She's about to kill Rose, but Michael appears in person to save Rose, and he is Ethan. Of course, if Evelyn is still alive inside the Megamycete, then Ethan would be too. It's been him the entire time protecting Rose. Rose ends up at the deepest level of the world where she finds the source of the Rose clones. Miranda is inside the Megamycete too, and what she's trying to do is clone Rose so that she can transfer her daughter inside of her. Miranda reasoned that the real Rose would be able to make it past Evil Duke, so she sends every clone into his mansion to get hunted before even thinking about using them as a vessel for Eva. A note also mentions how Evelyn got in the way of this, so likely even if one of the Rose clones could beat the Duke, Evelyn would have killed them anyway. Rose finally finds the magic crystal, but I really don't think this thing is real or works, because Miranda appears the second Rose picks it up.
Rose, I've waited so long for you.
Who are you?
My name is Miranda.
What?
You had become so powerful. Far too powerful for me to subdue directly. So, I had to lure you into this realm so that you might willingly relinquish your powers.
No, but Kay said...
Did he? Or did I? That was an illusion.
Miranda says it weakened Rose, but I would guess that's all a mental thing. Ethan then appears again to save Rose, and it's really stupid how they still won't show us his face. Ethan and Rose flee from Miranda, but she catches them at this cave opening. Ethan gets ready for round 2 with Miranda, but it turns out when we're not controlling him, he's not built like that. Ethan tries to get Rose to leave with her weakened powers, but she shatters the crystal and embraces her white mold powers, finally giving her the ability to dodge. I think this fight is nowhere near as good as Ethan's Miranda fight, but it's alright. Rose can absorb some of Miranda's attacks and use them to charge her own white mold attacks, which then stun Miranda and make her vulnerable to damage. Rinse and repeat many times, and Rose finally is able to use her powers to entirely destroy Miranda's consciousness. She rejoins Ethan, who's dying on the floor, and they still don't show his face, even when Rose literally says, "It's nice to meet you face to face."
If I had left you, then we never would have had this chance to talk face to face.
I think they completely ruined this super emotional moment by keeping this running gag of not showing Ethan's face. But with that being said, Rose has to say goodbye to her father and reawaken in the real world. The game actually ends with Rose visiting her dad's grave, something she does almost every week since seeing him inside the Megamycete. She leaves her dad's grave to join up with a squad of Chris's men. We don't know if they're in the BSA or not, but man, it's been 16 years. Who knows? But she's finally decided to use her powers for good and help Chris. By the way, at this point, Chris would be 64 years old. I mean, bro is never retiring from this. But anyway, that is the end of Resident Evil 8, and the end of my series recapping these games. It's been a lot of fun, and I just want to thank you personally for watching. Whether this is the only one you watch or you've seen the other ones, I don't care.